Welcome, welcome, welcome to the SubHub podcast with EmKay Sullivan
and Dani Moreno.
Today we are here with Kimber Mattox, recent winner of the FOURmidable 50K. She also ran the race in 4 hours and 6 minutes, breaking the previous course record by 4 whole minutes. And being the champion of this race, she is now a qualifier for the U.S. team for the World Champs in Austria this summer. Kimber, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to chat about races and Team USA. And I love the sub ultra distance. So thanks for making it a spotlight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We're stoked on it. How are you feeling? Just like first off, like how are the legs feeling today and stuff?
Feeling pretty good. Definitely had very sore quads for a couple of days. Those downhills they're pounders. And I think I wasn't totally prepared for the downhill part, but so yes, was sore for a few days. Going downstairs and sitting down was quite challenging for a couple of days, but feeling pretty good now.
Anything that required you to go down was sore.
Yeah, pretty much. Like sitting on the toilet was probably the worst. EmKay, I don't know what your worst was.
Yeah, you gotta like hold yourself while you sit down on your way to the toilet. But I did see that you went downhill skiing and cross country skiing afterwards. So you were still doing more than I was.
Well, I think those are those cases where social media makes it look more incredible than it is. It was very slow moving and pretty pathetic. But we were near Tahoe and we just couldn't pass up playing in the snow for a little bit. So
absolutely.
That's awesome. I did a similar thing in 2019. We came back and went through Tahoe, and yeah, snowboarding, I was just pathetic to say the least. I just kept falling on my face and I was like, this was a good idea, right? Like, but yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself after the race, after an incredible race. Well, we definitely want to get into the details of the race recap, but just for, folks that are maybe they've heard your name here or there, but like they don't know your background. We just want to like dig into that a little bit more and figure out how you got to the sport. So could you give us like a brief Kimber, maybe not baby Kimber, but like maybe teenage Kimber through your athletic years and like how you found yourself in trail running for now almost over 7 or 8 years at this point?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I have sort of a non-traditional route to running, which I think is sort of true of a lot of trail runners maybe. But yeah, I wasn't much of a runner until kind of in college. But I ran for a small Division III school track and a little bit of cross country, and I actually played soccer in college as well. But found my way into running primarily the steeplechase on the track. And then eventually after college, it's kind of like one of those, someone just suggested, hey, I think you'd be good at this trail running thing. So I just hopped in kind of a shorter trail race and just got looped into things like half marathon and the mountain races and had a couple of years of doing that. Had a lot of success in that early part, and I actually dabbled in obstacle course racing as well. So yeah, that was probably my biggest win. I won the Warrior Dash World Championship one time, got one of those like $30,000 giant checks. So that was kind of trail running career number one. And then had a kind of a long injury break for about 3 years, just kind of crazy injury. And didn't really think I'd ever be able to run again, but have been able to get back into running in the last few years. So I think 2019 was kind of when I started running again, and have just been doing trail since then, kind of moving up in distance. So I really liked the short mountain stuff to begin with and the half marathon, but now kind of moving up into the longer, still mostly 50K and down, but moving up into some of the longer trail stuff.
Yeah. And for our listeners, Kimber is extremely humble in that her last few years, she's been kicking ass, USA champion, 4th at OCC, an incredible field, top 10 at Worlds also last year.
5th at Worlds, right?
5th at Worlds, top 5 at Worlds. So yeah, this woman has been busy just crushing it. And to also know you are a world champion at obstacle racing doesn't surprise me, but like also is really intriguing at the same time. So just to go back, so you did steeplechase and then somebody introduced you to trails. Like, I just find that so fascinating because I feel like, at least at that point in the history of trail running, like not a lot of people were reaching out to, collegiate athletes or people that were doing the steeplechase. And just like, where were you at that moment in your life? And like, why didn't you decide to, keep pursuing steeplechase or pursuing the roads?
Yeah. I mean, at the time I was still loving track. And so I still really in the spring focused on track, but I was just connected with some people that knew the right people sort of. And, it was kind of when Nike Trail was starting to get a team going, like in the early stages of Nike Trail. And so I sort of got connected with the Nike Trail team. And that was kind of my introduction, like, hey, you got to go try a race and get connected with this Nike Trail group. So it was very much like I didn't even know trail racing was a thing. Honestly, it was my coach at the time was the person who sort of suggested it to me, but I didn't really even know that trail racing was something that was competitive or even that something that people really did. I was pretty unfamiliar with the whole idea of it. So just that kind of one person saying, hey, maybe go try this. And just I think the strength background of multi-sports. I grew up playing soccer and basketball, and then obviously steeplechase is kind of a strength-based sport. So I think there's a lot of that transferability, and we see that in a lot of other trail runners. Like, I don't know what your two backgrounds are, but I'm sure there's something unique that you could share that is like, oh, that's where that little trail edge sort of comes from.
Yeah, for sure. I was a steeplechaser too, so I am partial to thinking that steeplechasers are good at trails.
Yeah.
We got to be good at sighting the hurdle and
yeah. I'm like 100% convinced like steeplechasers are like, all the hidden talents of trail running. Grayson Murphy, Anna Mae Flynn, Eden Nilsson was like her top and her
really good at trails.
Ali Ostrander, like the list goes on. Just it's A plus B definitely equals C in that case. Yeah. I wanted to do steeplechase, so I hope that counts too.
I think there is. There's sort of a mindset thing too, right? Just that being daring. What's your edge? What's your trail racing edge?
I was a middle child, or I am a middle child. Yeah, just forging my own path, and trail running was a good spot for that. No, I played a lot of soccer, and I played like through high school, and got opportunities for that in college and stuff. I chose running, which was a great choice. Okay, all of that is just so fascinating. So steeplechaser, and so was Nike Trail your first sponsor?
Yeah, I was with Nike Trail back in like 2014, 2015, maybe 2016, around that time.
And were you still in Eugene at this point, or had you moved on?
Yeah, still in Eugene. So Eugene is track town, but they do actually have some awesome trails that I love to go back and run on. But I was still mostly training as a steeplechaser, and I think Dani maybe sort of trains in this way too, that you're just taking the fitness that you can gain from roads and tracks, and probably EmKay as well. Road and track fitness translates to trail running. There's certainly some specificity with especially with lots of vert and the longer stuff, but just taking that track fitness really and using it on the trails. It was not always pretty. I remember from that Xterra race, it gets kind of muddy sometimes, and there's this awesome video of me just like totally diving off the side of the trail and having to like climb back up, and so it wasn't always pretty.
Yeah, for anyone, just go on YouTube, type in Xterra World Championships, and you will easily find that clip because I had definitely seen it. So I guess I'm just curious. So you're getting sponsored by Nike Trail. You're in Eugene, and this is your first sponsor collegiately, like post-collegiately. Like how did that feel? Did you feel like there was a weird weight on your shoulder? Did you feel pressure? That just seems like an interesting city to be in, to be repping Nike at the time.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it feels like so long ago, and does sort of feel like baby Kimber, like middle school Kimber, something that I don't really remember what was going on in her brain at the time. But I think there was no more pressure from I don't think the sponsor side of things felt like pressure, but I think training for track and just the high intensity of trying to qualify for US championships or Olympic trials, there's certainly a lot of pressure in that. To me, I think the trail stuff sort of felt like lower pressure, and maybe that's why I gravitated towards it. But it was certainly fun to have that recognition of something, just being good at this thing, and them recognizing that. So I think it was a fun introduction into the trail world. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I tried to continue on my own on the track after I finished college, and found that it was way too high pressure for just me. I much preferred being on a team, and I found trails and was like, this is fun. I'm
Yeah.
gonna kind of veer towards this instead. So I totally get that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would resonate with that sense of trail, just being at a trail race. There feels like this sort of sense of camaraderie, and people want everyone else to do well, and especially with the Team USA stuff, you don't get that team scoring, that competing for a team goal or a team medal after college very often. So to be able to do that on the trails is pretty unique.
That's awesome. Well, just kind of like, because I do want to really dive deep into the race recap. So what injury did you have? And then what made you decide to return back to the trails? Because, baby Kimber was kicking ass. She was taking world championships. She was falling off the side of cliffs and still climbing her way out of them. And then you get this injury
This is a long time.
That's a long time. And you're coming back and you're just tearing shit up, arguably, more than baby Kimber did. So yeah, what happened, I guess. And so,
well, that's a really encouraging how you just described me as tearing it up more now than baby Kimber, because I think I still feel like I'm not as good as I used to be. And I think we all fall into that of like comparing ourselves to how fast we used to be, and that this even the sub ultra stuff is just a totally different sport, and a totally different event that I'm not gonna run a 3K PR when I'm training for a 40K, right? So I think that's thank you for that very kind compliment. But yeah, the injury, it was one of those injuries that was really hard to figure out, and that's why it went on for so long. Is I like flew all over the country and saw lots of different people, and nobody could really figure out what was wrong. And it was honestly just one of the hardest periods of my life. It was super hard, and I think all of us that come from a really rooted running background, or really any sport, you have some identity that's wrapped up in being an athlete and being a runner. And so losing that, along with, I had a lot of chronic pain through all of that time, that was really hard. And so it was just like the lowest of lows for me, for sure. And so it took a long time to get to the point where I was actually okay with, if I could never be a runner again, that I would be okay. And it was kind of at that point when I, finally was like, okay, I can just be Kimber, and having to learn a new identity, and that people still loved me, even if I wasn't athlete Kimber or runner Kimber, that my friends and my family, like, that we all have just us, our heart, who we are, that people love. And it's kind of a hard lesson to learn. But I'm grateful for it. But yeah, coming out on the other side of that, I really, for a long time, couldn't run a step really. And even for a long time, I couldn't really exercise. I joke that we had this period of time where all I could do was bench press and bicep curls. So just every single day I did the bench press, and I never got any better at it, even doing it every day. So eventually, through some really incredible things, I think just some healing and some really incredible healing people, like physical therapist, osteopath, we were able to figure out what was going on. And it was really driven by low back, kind of like lumbar spine instability. But in the process, I had every treatment you can imagine. I had a hip surgery, like a labral repair that maybe wasn't even really needed. And so I learned a lot through that process, but eventually was able to start hiking a little bit. And so I just like hiked my butt off for probably like a year, and then eventually was able to start running a little bit, and just gradually got to the point where I could race. And so I hopped in the US Mountain Champs in 2019. I think that was my first race in like 2 or 3 years. And that was kind of my reintroduction. And so it's just been kind of building it back from there.
Wow.
I think that is such a cool story. And I also think that like this will be good, especially because we're talking, mostly sub ultras, and a lot of the athletes in the sub ultra space are younger. Like Andy Wacker's doing this whole thing, like bringing collegiate athletes in. And I think for younger athletes to hear, like, you had a 3-year period where you couldn't run and you came back, and like, especially for females, like to know that our best years are still ahead of us in our late 20s, our early 30s, mid 30s, like is so encouraging to like athletes who are 23 and hurt right now and, can't quite see past that because they feel like now is the time that they're good. You are crushing it still. And so I think that's a really encouraging story that we can now share with
I think that's
generation.
I think that's such a good point. And I think I recently read Lauren Fleshman's book, Good for a Girl. And you're talking about injury and I'm talking about injury, right? But for females, there can also be these plateaus or declines in performance that have more to do with growing and our bodies changing, and that we can also rebound after that and be really good. And we have pregnancy sometimes and a whole variety of things, mental health issues, eating disorders. Any of those things can be little lulls in training that can be really hard periods of life, and we grow and change a lot in those times. And I think you're right, having that encouragement that talent doesn't go away. I remember my college coach actually saying that one time, because I ran a tiny bit in high school, and then I showed up my sophomore year of college and was like, I don't know if I'm any good anymore, but hey, I want to try this running thing. And I remember him saying, talent doesn't go away. Like fitness, we can always build fitness back, right? So I think you're right. Just that reminder that we can have these plateaus or these long periods of time where we don't run at all, and we can find that again. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. That's incredibly inspiring, for sure.
Yeah. And I think one last thing on your background before we go into race recap. Tell us a little bit about your job. I know that you and your partner, Eric, just moved to Fort Collins, and I'd love to hear more about your exercise physiology teaching position.
So I kind of, ever since I finished grad school, I've pretty much been a college instructor of some kind. I've kind of gone in phases of it being full-time or part-time. But I currently teach at Colorado State University in the Health and Exercise Science department. And I teach a variety of classes, exercise physiology, physical activity throughout the lifespan. Previously at the place I was at before, I was teaching anatomy and physiology and nutrition. So it's really pretty fun, especially exercise physiology. It's taking a lot of the things that we have to rely on, this knowledge, our physiology, our nutrition, our fueling, and getting to teach about that and give them, real world examples of those things. So it's a pretty fun job, but there are it makes racing limited to some degree, especially during the academic year, that I can't travel internationally maybe as much as I would like, but they're very kind in letting me, being flexible. But pretty fun just getting to teach about the things that I love and are so interesting to me. Pretty fun.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
All right. I feel like we could keep talking about, I want to know all the story of Kimber, and that could go on for hours. But we promised the folks a race recap, so let's start to dive into that. So we have both Kimber and EmKay here, who went 1-2 and are now both members of Team USA. Wow, I'm amongst queens right now, which is just so cool. I'm blessed. How did both of you guys, how did you guys feel going in? Like confidence high, just going in to get the job done? Yeah. sentiments?
Well, but before we jump into that, I want to say that before EmKay and Dani reached out to me about doing this little interview, before I even knew about all this, I sent Dani a message, or I responded to one of Dani's messages just congratulating me, and I was like, we need you to be on this team.
Yeah.
So EmKay and I are going to try to convince Dani to qualify for this team because we need her.
I love that. Maybe if I'm around you guys.
Dani's got a wedding.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I know. Just a small schedule detail. It's a couple of weeks before the race, so I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I could, but I think it'd
Wait,
be pretty rough.
Is it your wedding or you're going to a wedding?
No, it's my wedding.
Oh, that's exciting. You should enjoy that.
I plan on going to. Yes.
Yeah, you should go. You should probably go to that. But you could just do that in Austria, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Just change it last minute. And then, yeah, mini moon in Austria. We have talked about that. So, yeah.
No, you should enjoy that. I got married this last summer, and there's always races that could get in the way. And I almost traveled to Europe right before the wedding. And I was so thankful that I didn't. Like, that's a life thing. You want to soak it up. And it's just such a fun thing. So don't let us be bad influences on it.
Yeah. No, your wedding will be way more fun.
Yeah.
I love it.
Less painful.
Yeah.
Less painful. Maybe. I dance really hard, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Dani's going to be as sore as we are.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
How'd you guys feel going into FOURmidable? I'd love to hear.
EmKay, you go first. I want to know what was going through your head.
Okay. I was feeling really good. A little maybe underprepared, mostly just because I had been training for the Houston Half Marathon and then ran that race and then had a month before FOURmidable. So it was a bit of a quick turnaround, but I still felt like I had the background enough that I could get it done. But I was telling Dani earlier that prior to the race, I accidentally drank way too much caffeine, like way too much. I had a cold brew and I finished the whole thing. And Tommy was like, "Did you look to see how much caffeine was in there?" And I Googled it, and there were 330 milligrams of caffeine in it. So I was feeling good, just maybe a little nauseous.
That explains why you were going out so fast. And I was like, man, why are we running so fast?
This is what I wanted to hear. I was like, what was Kimber's perspective on this? How did you feel, Kimber? Were you over caffeinated as well?
I was not over caffeinated. I was probably just about right on caffeine levels. But yeah, coming into it, I'd had some sort of, in the weeks leading up, I'd kind of had some sort of niggles, that injury that I was out for those several years. Sometimes I'll get little flare-ups of things that are tight or weird symptoms. So I didn't really, so it was kind of like where you have to cut back training a little bit, and it's just not quite ideal training. So I guess I was going into it with kind of the mindset of get the job done, sort of like I was there just to try and make the team, whether that was first or second or, whatever it might be. And also knowing that I might not make the team on that day. So yeah, I wasn't like super confident, but I knew that I'd had reasonable training. So just, coming into it, trying to get the job done, but also knowing that I needed to start conservative because I didn't really know where fitness was at, and also even where like my body was at, like even the night before the race, thinking like, okay, I'm not really sure I can run a 50K this weekend. And I think also for me, training in Colorado has been new. So just moving here within the last 6 months or so, winter training is different, and getting in trails and vert and steep vert has been pretty hard. And so just not knowing really what my preparation level would be like.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to say, but then when EmKay and Claire, and there's some other ladies up there, it's kind of like, I'm going to sit back as much as I can, but still stay close enough. But it was fun to have them out there kind of making it an honest race.
I love that. Yeah, that was similar when I ran in 2019. It felt honest from the get-go. I was like, all right, no one's sitting back. Like, we're all going for this. And that's when you know it's going to be a good day. You're just like, I'm going to get the most out of myself. which is awesome. So the race develops. Who was in that front pack? I guess the first 10 miles or so.
It was me, Kimber, and Claire Rhodes, and then I think Allison Baca was with us for a little bit as well. But after we got back to the start finish line at mile 5, it was just the three of us. And that was a little wild because the 35K started 15 minutes after us, but they didn't do the first loop. So we spent the whole first descent down to no hands, just like passing hordes of people. It was just a constant of like, on your left, there's three of us, on your left, three people, on your left. So that was interesting. But yeah, it was the three of us. Oh, no, you go.
Oh, I was going to say, I also thought it was sort of funny in hindsight now. I remember one of the other ladies asking something about, like, during a race, like, when you guys have to pee, do you stop or do you just like keep running?
Yes.
And I remember my response being like, I've never really been in a race where I couldn't, like, it was never that close that if, like, I would just stop because you're either, several minutes behind someone or several minutes in front. And it was sort of like this, foreshadowing. Like, it was a tight race the whole way. And thank goodness I didn't have to pee because it was that close that it'd be, they were just all right there for a long time.
I was also laughing at that comment at like mile 20 when I was like, ugh. Kimber was like, I've never been in a race this close. And there was no time to stop the entire 4 hours.
Yeah.
I love that. Did you guys all carry your own stuff or were you stopping at aid stations? With it being so close, I feel like that's something that becomes really important, even for a 50K, because this 50K, you're flying, you're running just 4 hours and change.
Yeah. I carried all of my like nutrition and bottles that had calories in it, but I had like a water bottle that I was stopping to fill up at aid stations of just regular water. But some of them were crowded.
Yeah, there were. Yeah, I that's always a decision for me, like the vest versus the handheld versus the belt. And I think I always, if I can get away with not wearing a vest, then I go that route. So I just did the handheld and a belt and put my nutrition in my belt, pretty much just gels, and then had my handheld, which was electrolytes. And I just filled it up as I went at a few aid stations. But there were a couple where I kind of wanted to stop, but it was more crowded. And so I just kept going. But they do a great job. There's plenty of aid stations. So they do a really good job of keeping you well supported.
Nice. So when did it start to spread out a little bit? Because in the end, you guys all finished very close to one another. But at some point, the group had to start breaking apart. Like, who made that move and what were the reactions to the move?
Can I take this one? Because I was behind you guys.
Yeah, well, I was going to say before that, I would say like in the first half of the race, at least I know my perspective, I was like first 12 to 15 miles, I'm trying to do as little work as possible and keep my heart rate as low as possible. And so I felt like I was like totally dogging it and they were like keeping it honest. And I was just like, just sitting at the back. So I feel sort of bad. But I knew I was like, I gotta take it as easy as possible at the beginning. And like, I hiked some of the first couple hills. If I could like stay close enough to them and hike instead of run, that's what I did. So first part, I know I was sitting back. So I don't know what EmKay's perspective on that first part was like.
Yeah, the first part, Claire and I were definitely going back and forth a lot, like taking that lead. But we got to Training Hill, which is the second big hill on the course. Claire and Kimber were just gone. And I kind of figured they would be because my climbing legs, I know that Kimber's a really good climber and I'm still getting to know Claire, but now I know that she's also a very good climber. And so Claire was running, Kimber was like right behind her. And I had told myself going into that race that I had to hike that hill. So I was like, well, maybe they'll come back to you, but right now they are gone. And so that's kind of like, it broke up pretty big there for me, at least, until probably the bottom, like where we went down to the river between mile 14 and 18. And that was, I didn't catch back up to you guys until that point. But then we were back in our little accordion for a little bit. and then Kimber put the jets on.
Yeah, I think for me, from that first half of the race, I my goal was to be as conservative as possible, but sometime in that first half of the race, I had the fear, oh my gosh, they're too fast for me. I can't, I have to use the uphill. And yeah, kudos to Claire. She was climbing super strong and no fear. I feel like she was, running confident. And I think on any given day, any of the three of us could have been the one to cross the finish line first.
Oh yeah.
But so I know for me, I think it was kind of that third climb. Would that be where things kind of, I had this thought in my head, just I kind of got to use this to try to push a little bit, because I just knew that I was afraid that with the downhills and the flats that they were going to be too fast for me. That's definitely not my strength is usually climbing. So I think I knew I needed to sort of use that to at least push a little bit and make them work a little bit and play to my strength there. And then I knew it's kind of okay, then you're kind of flat and rolling for a long time. And then there's just a big descent and another big climb. So that was where I kind of knew I needed to put a little push in, just to play to my strength.
Yeah, I think that was a really smart move too, because you put a ton of time on me on that hill. And then I was trying so hard to catch you on the rolly part. And I kept getting close. And then we'd come to another little hill and you'd be gone again. And I'd get close again. And so I think making that move on the third hill was solid for you. I was still trying to just survive that hill.
Is the third hill the one with the switchbacks? It's the longer one.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So then Kimber, then at that point, are you kind of running scared? I need to get as far away from these girls, or is it, I'm feeling good, I'm glad I did the first part like that, I'm going to run this home?
I think a combination of both. I felt pretty good, energy wise, but I really was feeling it in my quads pretty early in the race. I think because I just hadn't done a lot of hard downhill running because of the niggles that had sort of popped up. And so I was really feeling it in my quads by probably mile 16 or 18. And so I was actually nervous I was going to have cramps or something like that, because I've had that in other races, like OCC major cramp issues, and a couple of other races. So I was kind of afraid of that, but energy wise, I felt pretty good. And so I think a combination of both. I did look back a lot to see where EmKay was at, but also to see I still had that perspective of trying to be in the top two. And I think from very early on in the race, I remember having the thought this is going to be a battle to the finish, whether I'm battling for second place or battling for first. It was clear it was going to be a tough race. So I think a bit of both, but I was kind of loving that EmKay was still there was never a point when she gave up. And I think probably in her head, she felt like she was further behind me than she was in those last 10 miles of the race, because you get to a point where you can't really see the people in front of you because the trails are a little more windy, there's more trees. So I don't think EmKay was really ever that far behind me, even if it felt like she was or she couldn't see me. So.
Yeah, I told Dani before we started recording that when we went down, so you at Way Too Cool aid station, you were probably 40 seconds in front of me. And I was having a really hard time eating because of all the caffeine. So I was starting to feel it. And so mentally I was oh, she's gone. And I couldn't see you on the downhill, because once you get to that downhill, you're in the trees, it's windy. And I got to no hands and you were only on the other side of the bridge. And I was she was there the whole time.
Yeah.
But you did put a lot of time on me on that last hill, because at that point, I was in the mindset of just don't get third. You have to make this team, just get second. Kimber, you might catch her, but she's having a day. She's probably going to win it. Just don't get third today.
I love that. So did you have people yelling at you, Kimber, how close EmKay was?
I could see EmKay, I just was looking back a little bit and seeing where she was at. So I didn't really need someone to tell me. At one point, I think I asked Tommy where third place was, because I just again wanted to make, like, I was there to like try to get the job done. But otherwise I really could tell where EmKay was most of the time until that last, like after we got back over No Hands Bridge. It's from there I wasn't really sure, but it was kind of like, you just got to keep pushing forward. I was also fortunate to have some like men in front of me that I think it's helpful sometimes to just be thinking about, I could be thinking about trying to run from the person behind me, but at some points it was more helpful for me to think about trying to catch the people in front of me and like the men in front of me. And so I think that was some of my perspective too, was like, try to keep moving forward, try to keep making up ground on the men that were in front of me.
That's awesome. And for the listeners out there, Tommy is EmKay's husband. So just again, reinforcing how awesome this community is. Second place's husband is telling first place how far his wife is from her, which is probably wouldn't happen in a road race. So that's amazing. So both of you guys finish under the previous course record. Did you guys know how fast you were running at all during the race?
I thought for sure I was going to run way slower than the course record just because of how I was feeling, because we'd been like what felt like sprint finishing from mile 12 on. And so when I crossed the finish line at like 10 seconds under, I was like, oh my gosh, we were rolling out there.
Yeah, and I feel like there was points in, like you're kind of always checking your watch a little bit throughout the race just to see like, where are we at in terms of mileage? How much time do we have left? And going into the race, I never had the perspective of even really thinking about or trying to go for the course record, but I did know generally what it was. And I remember thinking like, we might be like way under the course record based on the pace that we'd been running, but the course was a little bit longer than, I don't know if it would be previous years or just longer than what I had in my head, like thinking, oh, it's 30.5 miles. And it was more like 31 point something. And so I think actually early, like maybe halfway through the race, I started to realize like we're moving at a pretty good pace and we might be under the course record. But I think the last part of it took longer than I was expecting. So we were almost like closer, like I thought we might be under 4 hours based on where we were at and thinking it was a 30.5 mile course.
Yeah, they changed the course a little bit, Dani, like the day or the week before. And so the first loop was a little bit longer than previous years. So yeah, it was like 31 and, 0.3 or something instead of the 30.5 that it had been previously.
Dang.
But I do think we had a fast year. Like the course was pretty dry. There were maybe a couple of muddy spots, but it was dry and fast. And so I think with course records on trails, like the conditions matter. And, of course, the course record is always a great accomplishment, but it does not detract from the people who've run, 4 hours and 20 minutes on a year that it's muddy and slow. We definitely had a fast and dry year.
Yeah.
Yeah. The creek crossing, we only had one and it was only ankle deep. So
no, that's amazing. I mean, it's just like, for me, it's so cool because it just reinforces how competitive and how fast racing is getting, regardless of if you had ideal conditions or not. Like you guys ran hella fast for 31 and change miles. Kimber, you ended up being 7:55 average. And then EmKay, you're just a hair off of that. Like it just gets me so fired up and it's just inspiring across the board. And I think I told EmKay before the race, I was like, yeah, I think it could be a sub-4 course, like if everything was going well. And so that just like makes me feel a lot better that you guys ran a mile extra, because it probably means that I was right. So
I think even the course, I actually think the course that it is, even that little bit longer course, I think it could be a sub 4 hour course on like if you were really going for it. I think that it could be.
Thank you, Kimber. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree.
In the end, this whole interview is about me just making sure that I feel reinforced in my predictions. I'm kidding.
Well, if you'll try and go for the Team USA, we'll make you feel as good as you want.
Love it. It's like when someone's flirty with me and I change the topic. I was like, oh, Kimber. Anyways. Okay, well, just as an outsider perspective, kudos again. For Team USA selection races, to me, that is the epitome of what a Team USA selection race should be. Like, it should be tough. You should be fighting to the end for your spot. It's for people who want that spot so much. And yeah, you guys couldn't walk and sit down to pee and poop the next day, which tells me you put your whole effort into that. And it just makes me even more excited to follow along the World Championships in June, because I know we're sending good people. Maybe if Kimber keeps flirting with me, I'll think about it. So just to transition to this last part, just like what's next for you, Kimber? So again, congrats. What are you going to do between now and Worlds? I'm taking Worlds is a big focus for you this year. After getting 5th place last year, maybe you have some goals for this year?
Yeah. And just so that we don't get it wrong, I was 7th at Worlds.
Oh, 7th.
I don't want to take more spots, but
I appreciate that.
It's still so badass.
But yes, definitely a focus is Worlds. And one thing we were kind of, I think sort of exchanging messages about is kind of what, like, thinking about Worlds and thinking about the last Worlds, like why that race and what do you take away from it? And I think thinking back about this past year's race in Thailand, it was really fun to have all of the teams together. And maybe you guys will kind of talk about that if you dig into Team USA selection a little bit. But having the short mountain race teams and the long distance teams and the men and the women all together, and having whatever, like 50 or 40 athletes from Team USA all there together was really unique. And even just some really inspiring things to get to watch, like especially the men's 80K team, man, they just like fought for every spot. And this is something that I thought that these races were like cross country scoring style, where it's based on your position and just adding up those points, but it's actually based on the accumulation of time, which means that every second and every minute matters for anyone who's in your scoring positions. And that can make the difference, right? Like if you run 30 seconds faster, 30 seconds slower, even if it doesn't take you up a place or back a place. And so I think I really like that team aspect of things. So looking ahead to Worlds this year, I really want us to put together a good team and like shoot for, like, I want to win a gold medal with the team, like it was so cool to see that for the men, and that, them to be up there celebrating together, that win together. So I'm excited about that. So for sure, World is a big focus, and just really wanting us to be able to represent well when we go there. And then beyond that, I'm still kind of figuring out, there's so many different cool races in this time of year, like in April and May. Tentatively, I'm thinking of doing Ultra Trail Australia in the middle of May. And then beyond that, there's I have like a million ideas, but still figuring out exactly what else I want to fill in there. I like the idea of doing an FKT, whether it's in the spring or the fall, trying to do something like that. I did that Grand Canyon last year, and it was just a unique thing that felt like racing, but in this really organic, low-key way. So I would love to find another FKT to sort of go after. But yeah, we'll see.
I love that. And yeah,
Awesome.
Big plus one on the team aspect. It's really contagious. And when you are there from day one to the last race, it's incredible. And we did forget that little resume. Kimber is the fastest woman ever to cross the Grand Canyon. I feel like that should be noted in her rim to rim. It's just like such a crazy thing to think of, right? Like, you're the fastest female to ever get from one side to the other. It's incredible. Awesome. So I guess the last thing is, so if you do that ultra trail in South Africa, right? That one, Australia, that would qualify you for OCC?
OCC, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd like to do OCC. It's a little hard with my work because we start our semester before that. So we'll see if that's really possible. But that I would like to do it again. It was so fun this last year, and also so incredibly painful. The ups and the downs of that race, and Dani coming up behind me and just running a really smart race and just crushing it in the second half. So yeah.
Thanks for the love, Kimber. No, I really appreciate
hopefully
it.
Hopefully we'll all three be there crushing together, since we can't do worlds this year,
Pseudo Team USA.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Got to put a ring on my finger. That's already there. So I guess so with OCC, is it because it's 1 week later this year? Is that why it runs into your schedule versus last year?
It actually ran into my schedule last year. I was teaching, but I just did it remotely that week. So they were very kind and flexible, so we'll see if I can swing that again or not.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
I have one more question before we leave. What in your training is going to change between now and June?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there'll be a ton that changes. I train relatively low volume for an ultra runner. And we focus kind of on a lot of the same things throughout the year. Good aerobic base, keep maintaining running economy, but then also the specificity of what we're training for. So I hopefully either spring break or as the trails get more clear, less snow, hopefully I can get in a little bit more vert, a little steeper climbing between now and June. But I think the majority of training will be pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And you have years of background with training on vert, so you should be good.
Yeah.
I feel yeah. But there is a specificity thing that's hard to mimic, especially when you're going over to Europe. There's a different, it's a different kind of steep trails over there.
Amen, sister.
And for me, it's the humidity. I forget what it's like.
Oh yeah.
Until we go over there.
Yeah.
100%.
I personally, I kind of like the heat. So that's always that I don't usually mind that too much, but of course it affects our performance no matter what, even if we like being warm, right?
Yeah. 100%. Well, cool. Last question, just to wrap us up. Any shout outs to people for this last training block and FOURmidable coaches, parents?
Yeah.
Partner?
Well, yeah, definitely to my coach David Roach. Almost everyone knows David, but he is always just believing in me more than I believe in myself, which is really helpful. And also just no pressure. This training block, I had some of these niggles, and there was never any pressure. Even the day before the race, he was like, if you do that first 6 mile loop and you're not feeling it, if your back is bugging you, if you're, having any injury related issues, it's not worth risking it in February. So just really, really good balance of believing in me and helping me to train hard, but also not putting the pressure on to force me into a bad position of injury when we don't need it. And then I had the best cheering squad ever at FOURmidable. My husband Eric came, and then 2 of my friends from the Bay Area drove out, and they were just all over the course cheering, and just so fun. So very thankful for them.
I love that.
They were super hyped, and they were cheering for me too. It was very welcome.
I love that. Oh, gets me so hyped. I want to do something. No, I'm so happy for you both. Well, if you too would like to qualify for a USA team, there are some races coming up in April. Early April, there's Lake Sonoma 50 mile where you could qualify for the 80K team. And then we have Sunapee Scramble, April 29th in New Hampshire for the classic team and the vertical team. I believe they're back to back. And then the next opportunity to qualify for the team that is both Kimber and EmKay right now, which who wouldn't want to be teammates with these wonderful ladies, is Breakneck Point Trail Marathon in New York, May 6, 2023. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Kimber. Loved this conversation. Feel like we could talk to you for days. So hopefully we could have you on again someday.
Yeah, so fun. And we're recruiting strong women. We want to represent Team USA well. So yeah, come join us.
Love it.
Thanks, Kimber.
Thank you.